Okay, so just
Stop. Okay, I'm muting.
I just muted for you. Okay. So the Torah portion this week it's called Shoftim, which talks about justice and judges. We're not going to talk about that. It's a great topic. What we're going to talk about today is trust in God. Now, faith in God and trust in God are two very different exercises, internal exercises. Believing in God it's either you have it or you don't, but or some gray area in between perhaps, but it's something that it may prove actionable, that I'm doing something because I believe in God, but people can believe in God and then do whatever they want. It's really not a contradiction. It may be a theological contradiction, but it's not. It's believing in God is just it's looking at a web of the world. I believe I have parents. I mean, I know I have parents. I mean, the things the way you look at the world, and then, but it's something that isn't necessary. It can be kind of a passive part of your system, your Weltanschauung. Trust is very different. If I go to a doctor, God forbid, with something serious, and I put myself at his or her, I wouldn't say mercy, but really I'm giving my care over to them. It's not that I believe they're there. Of course I believe they're there. I trust them. Trust is a sense of security, and you act based on trust or lack of trust. You don't act. So trust is believing in God is much easier than trusting in God. A lot of people, if you take a poll of belief in God, it's probably down these days, but it's belief in God doesn't cost you anything. Say believe in God. Saying, do you trust in God? There's a day ahead of you. And do you trust that God's going to take care of you? That's going to be a much more difficult question to answer. And you'll know, because if you trust God, you're not worried. If you trust God, you're in good hands. So, and if you don't trust the pilot or the attorney or the engineer or the doctor, there are concerns. That's life. And when it comes to human beings, there are people we trust. There are people who have earned our trust. But I guess in the final analysis, human beings are human beings. There's probably can't be 1,000% trust. Torah wants us to have trust in God. God doesn't have bad days. God doesn't say, oops, I only make one mistake in 20 years and you're it. It's God. So trusting in God really means a certain calmness to the one's internal demeanor, not what everybody can see on the outside, but to feel I'm in good hands. And that is not as easy as it sounds. Feeling that one's in good hands to the extent that it allays fears, because fears are normal. Fears are natural because our vulnerability is part of life. So if a person knows they're vulnerable, and a person sees something that endangers them coming at them, fear is actually a healthy response, because then you do something about it. The idea of believing in God to the extent that we feel, and God who has the capacity for all types of protections against anything, means a certain sense of relationship where we're calm. We're going to do things to help ourselves. We'll talk about that, but we're calm. That is not the same as faith at all. Faith doesn't necessarily have the type of impact on you at all. So you believe in God. And if you believe in God and you're praying, that feels wonderful. But the thing is the idea of actually trusting God. So that's what today's discussion is about. Now I want to say up front, I use this curriculum because I like this curriculum, and because it comes from Chabad, so I can breathe a little easier. I can trust them more because it's my peeps. Today wasn't their shining day. So my trust has been diminished a little bit. Why? They're going to present a totally legitimate perspective on trusting God. Nothing they say here is wrong. But the perspective on trusting God, which they meant to articulate, is not articulated. How do I know what they meant to articulate? Because they said they wrote a footnote where they took this from. This is not that. I have no idea what they were thinking. Actually, I can guess, but I'm not. So I'm going to even bother. But so we're going to read what's here because it's a legitimate Torah attitude. But I also translated some other things to be able to, what I would say is kick this up a little bit. How they present it, and then talk about something that's a perspective that takes trust to a different level. Okay, so we're going to start off. Okay, let me share screen. And this is going to be all the way up here. Hello. Maybe not. Oh, no.
You're having a rough day today.
Very. But I trust. It'll all be good.
Tap on the underline. You trying to minimize that?
No, I'm good.
Okay,
I think I'm good.
Okay.
aim the camera just a little bit lower.
Have to compliment.
That's good.
Okay. It's 9:46. Excellent. Okay, so text 1 on page 96 comes from this week's Torah portion. In this week's Torah portion, there are a bunch. It's actually a fascinating Torah portion because there's a whole smattering of many different mitzvahs. One of the mitzvahs relates to going to war. There are rules, there's laws of going to war, and there's a humanity going to war. One of the things we're told by the Torah is not to unnecessarily destroy anything, fruit trees especially. You have to be very careful. We want to be successful. We don't want to just, and I think they say war is hell, and people tend to throw away any inhibitions. And the Torah says don't throw away your humanity. But that's not what today is about. What it is about is that there was a special wars in generally in Jewish law were only going to be defensive wars, and certainly since the times of the temple, those are the only types of wars that are permissible. 67 was seen as a defensive war. The Egyptian Air Force was clearly going to poised to attack Israel, and Nasser was saying, "I'm going to attack Israel." He didn't have to wait till they fired a missile. We could attack them while they're on the ground, but that was called a defensive war. In going to war, we took war very seriously. War was a very serious human endeavor, and it always had a religious national end to it. And part of that was there was a special Kohen, from someone from the priestly class, and they were the Kohen who would be their guide of war. Not that he was a military strategist, but a spiritual coach. And the Torah says that this spiritual coach would get up and speak to the people and to those eligible for the army and say, "I don't want you. We don't need you going into battle if you're not wholehearted about this." And naturally, some people won't be wholehearted. So the Torah says very explicitly, if you just got married, you're in a year of marriage, and you really don't want to leave your spouse behind, it's okay, go home. If you just started a new business and your mind is on that, go home. Just built a new house, go home. These are things explicit in the Torah. Then the Torah says, if you're afraid, go home. Because we're afraid, we're concerned that your fear will infect others. You have to be confident going into battle. And if you're not confident, if you can't find it, go home. You watch this on TV. We don't need you in the ranks. This is what the Torah says. So this is how it starts off in text 1. When you go out to war against your enemies, and you see horse and chariot, people more numerous than you, you shall not be afraid of them, for God is with you, the God who brought you up out of the land of Egypt. God's with you. What are you afraid of? So they have spears and the chariots and the shields, but you have God. And it will be when you approach the battle that the Kohen shall come near and speak to the people. He shall say to them, Hear, O Israel, today you are approaching battle against your enemies. Let your hearts not be faint, and you shall not be afraid. You should not be alarmed. You should not be terrified because of them. Why? For God is the one who goes with you to fight for you against your enemies to save you. And we go on 97 to paragraph 8. And the officer shall continue to speak to the people and say, What man is there who is fearful and faint-hearted? Let him go and return to his house. They should not cause the heart of his brothers to melt as his heart. In other words, not so that your fear not be infectious. Let's take this a little bit further. Text 2a, one of the greats in the 1200s, or Rabbi, he says, when you go out to war against your enemies and you see horse and chariot, the people more numerous than you, you should not be afraid of them, which is what we just read. We were warned with this, that if a person sees trouble nearby, God's salvation should be in their heart, and this is what they should trust. So this Rabbi Yonah says it's not just about war, it's about life. I'm not a soldier, but I deal with problems every day. We all do. It's part of the human condition. So looking at a problem, think about our own ability to help ourselves, which we should. We think about, which professionals we can hire or whatever the particular problem is. And I guess naturally, in our self-assessment as to how able we are to meet this problem, that's how confident we'll be. Or in the absence of that, how much we're going to be aggravated and anxious about it during the day. What Rabbi Yonah is saying is, you're the same, you're a soldier. And we should not feel this anxiety because God's with us. This is what the verse states. His salvation is near those who fear him. And likewise, it is written, what ails you that you fear man who must die. Okay. So, and now text 2b, I'm sorry, on page 98. Thank you, David. This is from Maimonides. God prohibited us from being afraid of the enemy during the time of war. Now, fear is natural, but it is a mitzvah. Like, where God, God gives us a mitzvah to love people, love God. You can't really command emotions, but the idea is to try to get your head into that space. God wants us to try to get our head space to a place where we're not afraid, and we not run away from enemies or from our problems. Rather, it is an obligation upon us to be resilient and stand firm and be strong against the other people. Anyone who retreats and runs away has already transgressed this negative commandment. Torah states, you shall not be terrified by them. This prohibition is repeated, do not fear them. This command not to run away and not to retreat during the time of war is repeated frequently, as it is the only way to confirm the true faith. Okay, so here is God, infinite, loving parent, all able, all loving. We're good. Then, before we get to our own experience, just looking at the Torah, what happens if a person feels that I think I kind of unplugged a little bit from God? Maybe God, it takes care of everyone when there's this relationship going on. I mean, I'm not sure I have those protections. Person might say, why? I haven't, turned to God. If I was talking to someone else, someone called me with a problem, and they say that they haven't connected with the Jewish community in 50 years, I say, trust in God. I say, what God? I forgot him. Who does he didn't forget me? How does this work? So in the Torah, actually, it says in the primary commentary on the Torah, this week's Torah portion, when we say that a person is afraid, so on page 99, text 3, it says, what man is there who is fearful and faint-hearted? They quote from the Talmud, Rabbi Yosef the Galilean says, it means one who's afraid of his sins, that they will cause him to fall in war as he is unworthy. God gives us a buffer. We live in a world which is somewhat a jungle. We don't get to control other people's choices, and you got to watch your back in this life. That's just the way it is. We can't be Pollyannish about it. We do believe that God gives us a buffer to help us, to protect us against these things. And the more connected we are with God, the more we are connected with our buffer. Rabbi, the Talmud says, why, when the Kohen goes and says, who's afraid? Doesn't mean it's someone who's just afraid. The person says, oops, I think I might have chipped my armor here. I don't know if I deserve that kind of divine protection. And text, the truth is, and that's not negated. There's a point to that. Text 4a, we find in Isaiah. Isaiah says, if you forgot God your maker, this is this week's of Torah, and we'll read this in Shul, who spread out the heavens, he's rebuking the Jews. You forgot God, who spread out the heavens, founded the earth, and you fear constantly the whole day because of the wrath of the oppressor when they were prepared to destroy. You're disconnected from God, so now you don't have the sense of connectedness. You're consumed by anxiety. And where's this wrath of the oppressor? What are you really worried about? And the Medrash tells us in 4b, page 100, it is this that the prophet accuses Israel of and says to them, you forgot God your maker, who spread out the heavens and founded the earth. Meaning, if you see the heavens quake and that the earth quakes, only then could you learn to be afraid all your days. But this is not the case. If you see that the world's falling apart, be afraid. I mean, this is the language of the Medrash. It's saying, don't be afraid. You have God with you. So there is an idea in Torah thought that we can unplug ourselves from some immunity, divine immunity. We're going to see later. One of the things, I don't know how, they kind of jumbled this a little bit in my opinion, but they're going to bring a little bit later. There is a scriptural story we may all, at least some of us for sure, could be familiar with. Jacob ran away from his twin brother Esau, who threatened to kill him. So he left. That's when as he was leaving home, he had a dream, and he saw angels going up and down the ladder. He left his home for a couple of decades. God promised him, I will be with you. I will protect you. Pretty good. That's not just a faith thing. God, he heard it from God in that dream. He comes back after a couple of decades, and his brother Esau comes to meet him. He's coming back to the land of Israel. And Esau comes with an army. And the Torah says, Jacob was afraid. Well, you think about it. The guy, he's a vicious guy. He's got a history of raping, pillaging, and murdering. He's got an army of fierce-looking people. He's afraid. The Talmud says, afraid what? You got God's promise. You're Jacob. So he said, maybe I kind of exhausted a little bit of God's kindnesses to me, or maybe I did something wrong. Maybe that promise was predicated on a certain relationship and I haven't kept my end of the bargain. So maybe it's not just a blanket promise. It's the same idea. We can chip away at our own immunity. It doesn't say bring it here. It's going to come a little later. But now they bring another point to this. Text 5a, with bottom of 100. It's an interesting story. We have Hillel the elder, a Jewish leader of the first century, who's famous through the Hillel houses, but he's just definitely one of our greats through history. Sages taught there was an incident involving Hillel the elder. He was coming on the road and he heard a scream in the city. So he's heading home. And he hears a tumult going on, crying coming from his city, from his town. How big could this city have been? oh, something's going wrong in my town. Many of us would say, well, I got my wife and kids are there. He has reason to fear. He said, I am certain the scream is not coming from my house. How did he know? They didn't know. So I trust that I have nothing to fear here. And of him, the verse says, he should not be afraid of evil tidings. His heart is steadfast, trusting in God. Let me try to unpack all this. Text 5b, also from the Talmud. A student was once walking after a great rabbi, Rabbi Shmuel, son of Rabbi Yossi, in the marketplace of Zion. Rabbi Shmuel saw that the student was afraid. He said to him, "You're a sinner. What are you worried about? I don't know what's bothering you, but why are you worrying about it?" I mean, it's not the most empathetic thing to tell somebody when they look like they're anxious. But assuming he first put his arm around him and said, "Can I buy you a coffee?" He said, "Why are you so fearful?" It says, "The transgressors in Zion are afraid. Trembling has seized the ungodly." The student replied, "But 1 second, is it not written, happy is the man that fears always?" A person should never be so confident in themselves. Shouldn't we always worry? At least a healthy worry. Rabbi Shmuel said to him, that verse is written in regard to matters of Torah. You should worry about whether or not you're doing rightly by God. One should be afraid lest he forget them. For everything else, one must trust in God. His point was, we should be trusting in God. Now, there's a text 6 from a rabbi, in the 1800s. I have his book because it's a commentary on another book. I'm not sure why they brought him, but it says past sages have cried foul about Hillel's behavior. I just don't, I don't like exactly how he phrased it. That's why I said that. Hillel's behavior is curious. How do you know it's not going to be in your house? But he says that means you think he makes this rabbi makes a calculation, an equation. As connected as you are to God, that's how confident you can be. So Hillel saying, I know that's not going on in my house, meant I know that I've got no weaknesses.
But isn't that contradictory to the Baba Misa that when somebody sees an ambulance going by in the general direction where they live, you're not supposed to say, I hope that's not mine, because whatever God wills, it is.
I don't know. That's say it again. I hope that's not my house. So if you don't, why? So if whatever God wills it is, so why should you hope it's not your house?
I mean, the point is, he doesn't know.
I've never heard that as a thing with ambulances.
You're supposed to pray that the person doesn't die when you see the ambulance.
That would make sense to me. That would make sense to me.
I mean, whoever it is, whether it's your house or not,
exactly.
That's where I have a problem.
I get it, and I as we all should, but Hillel is saying, at least for my life, I know that I feel confident about. The people I'm worrying about, I'm okay. Now, what he's saying is this rabbi is reading it into Hillel saying, I've got no flaws, which it doesn't have to be, but he's saying it means there is no flaws. This doesn't seem to be compatible with Hillel's legendary humility. So he has as a question. So before we go to 7, what we have here is that the Torah tells us that an ideal is that we trust God to the extent that we are calm, even in the face of a problem. The question is, it would seem from some sources that our intelligent trust in God's protection should be commensurate to how much we're helping God, to our own observance. In which case, none of us have the right to be totally calm about it. So, how does that all work? Now, let's define trust a little bit in text 7. Trust is peace of mind of the one who trusts that one relies in his heart that the one he trusts in will do what is good and proper for him on the matter that he trusted him with. This is from a rabbi, great rabbi of the 11th century. And what he's saying is trust means that I know I'm in God's hands. And if this doesn't work out in the way I'd like it to work out, it's not because I've been abandoned. This is what God has destined for me, which is not an easy thing to accomplish, to achieve, but it's not saying I know it's going to be good. I know that you're good, and whatever you have in store for me, I accept. And when you look at text 8, oh, did I read text 7? Yeah, text 8. If one, on page 103, even if one believes, it is possible to lose trust out of fear of past sins. A person can be afraid that misfortune will befall them because of that sin. Indeed, our forefather Jacob was concerned that sin would be his downfall and was afraid of his brother Esau. As the verse states, Jacob became very frightened and was distressed. That's what I just mentioned. One can ask, God promised him, and behold, I am with you. God told him, I'm going to be with you. Why was he afraid? It must be that he was concerned about sin. This is it's not from they're quoting this Rabbi Bachi, but this is the Talmud asks it and answers it that way. So, in that case, so we look at text 9a, and this is a quote from the Rebbe, but it is indeed a quote from the Rebbe, but the Rebbe doesn't leave it here. He says the idea of betachon, 9a and 104, the idea of trust, betachon is trust, is predicated on the belief that everything is from God. So if one is in a stressful or unfortunate situation, it's not because the agonizing factor has any control over the person. Rather, everything is from God. As such, the person is completely calm, as either way, there's nothing to be concerned about. If they don't deserve any harm, then God will certainly deliver them from the situation, including when it seems naturally impossible for that to happen. After all, who can tell God what to do? God can manipulate nature. So the idea is that trusting God means just because there's a problem that seems insurmountable, there's nothing insurmountable to God. What he's saying is if I don't deserve harm, and if text 9b, if the person does not deserve divine kindness, and indeed does deserve punishment, they're still completely calm. For they're confident that their misfortune is not a result of that specific event, but rather directly from God. They know that they've come up short with God and are therefore experiencing misfortune, and so they fear nothing other than God himself. So I want to put in this category what some of you have probably heard from me before, but one of those events that, we all have events that are emblazoned in our mind. This October, God willing, my father-in-law turns 90, and my father-in-law went through 7 Nazi what he calls death camps, extermination camps, concentration camps. He distinguishes between them. He Baruch Hashem is in great shape. So for his 90th birthday, he's taking grandchildren, grandchildren, great-grandchildren, anybody who's willing to come. It's quite a ticket to Auschwitz. To him, this is his answer to Hitler. To go back there with his Jewish family, say, we're here, you're not. He had a hell of a childhood. And I don't want to make this about my father-in-law, but just as an example of this idea of feeling close to God even when things are not going right. So my oldest son, may he live and be well, is named Laser. He is named for my wife's oldest brother. Also same name, Laser, who passed away in a car crash in 1988. I wasn't yet part of the family, but I knew them. I knew him, and I knew the family, and I was by his funeral. It was quite a shock, and he was a young man. He was expecting his first child, and she was born 3 days later. So he never met his daughter. So when that daughter, who lives in New Jersey, when she got engaged, and because mother remarried, and he was a Chabad in Mercer County, and the new husband took over Chabad in Mercer County, New Jersey. So it was a very raw time for my in-laws. The only thing they have left from their son died. Remember, my father-in-law went through enough death, and now he gets whacked with this. And so we made a family gathering to celebrate her engagement, and we did it here. Family came into Baskin Ridge, did it in the atrium here, and the bride and groom were there. Her adoptive father, who's a great guy, he's been wonderful. He wasn't there because just to make sure everything's all right. We didn't know how my in-laws were going to take this, and we had a meal, a mazel tov meal. But everybody else out on their minds like, what? Laser's gone, and this is all they have. My father-in-law, who has a PhD in philosophy from NYU, and is an accomplished rabbi, but he knows how to think and he knows how to ask. And he's not a lemming. He stands up to say l'chaim. And before he opens his mouth, there are tears coming down his cheeks. And he says, I have been blessed by God my entire life. And right now, I just want to ask God to continue his blessings. He says, I have a lot of questions for God. There's a lot I don't understand. But I will not allow my questions to distract me from the fact that I have a beautiful family and I have a granddaughter who got engaged, and this is a time to be joyous. And he sat down. I'm getting tears now. I was speechless. I just went to give him a hug. There's nothing I could do. So while I'm not inside of him, what he presented to us was, I don't get it. I don't like it. But I know I'm in God's hands. And I know Leila's in God's hands. And I'm not going to allow that to paralyze me. So thank God, I've never had, everybody's got stresses. Everybody's got something. He's had it in an extreme way. Holocaust is as extreme as it gets, and God forbid, losing a child is unfathomable. I saw a human being who's able to feel that I don't understand it, but I know I'm in God's hands, and I'm just asking that to continue. Yeah, it's kind of a humbling thing. Yes, go ahead.
That's what I was struggling with
Yes.
this entire time,
Yeah.
was thinking of out of 6 million Jews, how many of them actually had complete trust in God, and
I'm sure plenty.
exactly, the percentage is extremely high. It's
It's
because I'm the anxious one, and I'm like,
it's barbaric to draw a correlation between people who died in the Holocaust and their faith. That's horrible. And the Rabbi used to say it. He said, even the Satan himself could not come up with a calculation that justifies this. There's nothing you can say that says, oh, this is why the Holocaust happened. It's human evil that God allowed, and it's a festering sore. We don't have that answer, and we're not looking for an answer, because an answer kind of resolves it. It can't be resolved. So bad stuff happens. And bad stuff happens to people. And if everybody who was observant didn't have bad stuff happening, there would be a hell of a lot more people observant. It doesn't work that way. The thing is, the question is, are we totally vulnerable to the world? Are you? The Torah faith is that actually we're probably protected from many things we don't even know about that could have happened. And in your own life, you can look and say, oh, thank God that didn't happen, because you come close sometimes. I think I've had issues like that, right? It's where something, you averted a car crash. It happens. So do I say that was luck? I want to say thank God. Now, in my day ahead, there certainly, and this is a large conversation. But I guess we got to do it. I want to deal with it in a way where where we're away from. Everybody's going to have aggravation, and we'll talk about that soon too.
When you say though, deserve harm,
Deserve harm?
deserve harm. And maybe I'm losing in the translation and it doesn't mean deserve.
Where
harm.
where does it say deserve
That
harm?
in 9A, if they
9A.
don't deserve harm,
Okay.
and then God will deliver them.
Okay, so I wouldn't say good point. It's translation, and the translation of the word it's in Hebrew here, and the Hebrew is, if this was destined for them.
Okay.
It's,
I'm sorry, I also want to
Yeah.
say that to my thinking,
Yeah.
it's like the emanations of God, Gevurah and Chesed, right?
Yeah.
Sternness. That sometimes I think in my own life, that like seemingly bad things happen to me, like from a certain point of view, but they really were good because they set me right.
so okay, so we're gonna
So
get
I think of it, even I can think of something right now. It actually was a good thing, it was a blessing that I really got hurt.
so okay, so here,
So I don't want blessings like that.
yeah, it's exactly. It's that tuition we don't have to pay. We want to pay. It's there is that element, and I guess this is kind of a complex subject, but I'm glad you bring it up. I'm just let's start from this. I have a responsibility to protect myself. That's what God gave me. That I have to I shouldn't walk out into a busy highway and say I believe in God. And that's not the Torah way of living. I shouldn't say I'm going to trust God to pay my rent, but I'm not going to look for a job. It is our responsibility to create conduits for divine blessing. But if I am going to do that, and I'm going to look for a job, or I'm going to go to a doctor, whatever my problem is, I'm always going to recognize that I can create conduits for success, but the accomplishment depends on God. I can speak, I can deal with what's considered the person considered the most adept doctor, the smartest person in finance. All of those things, there are variables. No one controls all the variables. And so I want to line up the best doctor, the best finance guy, the best lawyer, and set myself up for success. And then pray. Because even if you've got an A team, it doesn't always work. We can't control outcomes. If in something where you can control an outcome, you're not talking about much profit. You put cash under your mattress, and even there you can't fully control it. So we have to, and I'm going to be going a little over time today, but it's an important conversation. I'm just forecasting. So I have to take care of myself. We all have to take care of ourselves. So to start from, if I was putting together this class, one thing I would have put in here is that there's a fascinating medrash, at least something that resonates very much with me. The medrash tells us, when it talks about the beginning of creation, when God created the world, it says that when God created iron, the trees complained. So it's a metaphor. Why do the trees complain to God? So because now there's going to be axes. There's going to be axes. They're going to get chopped down. They're anxious. So what does God tell the trees? Don't worry. Just make sure not to give any wood for the handle. Very profound message. So first thing is make sure that you're not giving someone that they can chop you down with. Right? I can't control anyone. but I can make sure that that I'm not putting myself in a position where I'm giving someone an opportunity to hurt me. That's up to me. So the trees, so to speak, can't control the wood choppers, but they can make sure not to give any wood. Okay, so that's more of a metaphor. But the idea is for ourselves, and ultimately we can only control ourselves, and barely that. So if I control myself, I want to make sure not to put myself in a vulnerable position, not to do anything, right? Well, they say if you don't want it on page 6, don't do it. There's certain.
I know people fit on page 6.
And it isn't even on page 6 anymore.
Don't contribute. If you don't want something done to you, first make sure you're not contributing to the problem. Again, you may be totally not doing that, and someone has ill will. But first, do it. Control what you can. Don't open yourself up. Don't make yourself vulnerable. Don't give someone else a gun to shoot you. That's number one. Number two, if someone's coming at me, what I need to do is try to protect myself. Right? A lawyer, a doctor, whatever it may be. Person they get a diagnosis. The first response, whatever, you can't judge people's responses, but the healthy response, the functional response, is to say, how am I going to deal with this? To call a doctor, whatever it is, to see what we can do. Now, I understand there's some things beyond what a doctor can help, but let's say we're talking to tackle it. Let's get it done. I'm dealing with my father's oncology for several years, and if I speak to a doctor who is kind of nothing we can do except do this, I move on. I want someone who's want to think about, not to tell me what I want to hear, but who has an attitude of what they can actually accomplish here. Because at this point, intelligent people would say theirs. So there is the idea of we have to work. Now, let's see something. I tried, but I have this aggravation. And I'm going to tell you a bunch of things here out loud, and then we're going to go through it here. You have what Larry just said. Some people are blessed with in the continuum of their lives, where they can look back at struggles and troubles and say, actually, I grew from this. Actually, this was a gift. And I just spoke with in Morristown. We had a student coming, who his older brother didn't have a good experience in our summer program years ago, and he was sent home, and it wasn't pretty. But they're sending the kid, and I spoke to the father. I said, I'm really hoping. I understand what happened, but I wasn't involved the first one. I'm hoping that this will be a good summer. I said, I got to tell you, that was the best thing that ever happened to him. He needed a kick in the pants, and I was angry. But looking back, that was the wake-up call he needed. You don't always get to say that.
That was what?
That was the call, the wake-up call he needed. Now, what I'm saying is, you can't. Not every problem is going to. You can't really try that in cancer wards. It doesn't work well. But it does. It can in life very often. So
You've got some contradictory ideas here.
go ahead.
Basically, you're talking
that's the
about,
way you see them. Yeah,
giving somebody lashes, but,
I didn't get to that yet.
huh?
I didn't get to it yet.
Okay.
Now, you read ahead. Okay. Now, another point of this is that there is a Torah idea, and it works its way into our Yiddish expressions, and it's Talmudic in its source, that aggravation is actually cleansing for the soul. You probably have, those who grew up with Yiddish speaking parents or grandparents, they may remember something bad happened. Let's say it's a kapora. A kapora means an atonement, a cleansing. Understand? What I just smashed up my car. So what do you tell me? Cleansing. The Talmud says that in our journey through life, in caring for our soul, caring for our relationship with God, and relationship with others, part of the human condition is that we pretty much necessarily, always assimilate what I would call spiritual toxins. And therefore, we do that usually in the pursuit of some kind of self-interest or pleasure. The aggravation that we have helps to cleanse it. Because again, and this is another very big topic. If I did something wrong, I don't even remember what I did wrong. When I was 19, that's on my soul. So either I remember it and I apologize, and I go through the humbling experience of going to that person saying, if I remember it, right, say, I'm really sorry, that was really insensitive of me, and looking back, that was terrible. That exercise of genuine remorse helps to cleanse us. The soul leaves the body. There's a whole cleansing process. One of the things that can cleanse us while we're alive is aggravation. And many people, if I say that, say, wow, I'm really clean. I got an aggravation to for a whole laundromat. It's, and the Talmud says it could be aggravation, again, to quote the Talmud, and I would have had that here also if I was creating this lesson. It could be as much as looking for a quarter in your pocket and you come up with a nickel. And you're fine. So that's not such a big deal. Usually have much bigger aggravations. But as our grandparents taught us, it's a kapara. It helps to cleanse. That's a Torah idea. Now, there's another idea, which they do bring in here, and I wouldn't have brought in here because I think it's a little distracting. This idea of cleansing is the whole idea behind punishments in Torah. There are, in our penal system, another whole topic, there are reasons for punishment. Punishment can be a deterrence. Punishment can be revenge. You did that, now you're gonna suffer. And I think there is an element of that there. In our minds, these are, what do they call them? Rehabilitation.
They call the Department of Corrections.
Corrections, yeah. But there's other names. We use the words as though what we're doing is actually rehabilitating people. I don't think much of that goes on. I don't know, but I'm not much. When I did look into it, I didn't think that was actually what's done in the prisons. It was more containing them, protecting the public. Torah, God's system, is about helping to undo damage you did. You stole, repay. You have to try, if you damage someone. That's if someone else is involved. The main thing is you have to cleanse your soul. And that's what even the capital punishment, or if you're talking about a soul, the capital punishment, and we can't go into all of it now. It's so clear from the Torah's description of things that this is not about revenge. This is about a Torah prescription for cleansing the soul. And one of the things, if we look at text 10, it says commandment 594 is the mitzvah to give lashes to a sinner. One of the reasons for this mitzvah, the Jewish people are called God's children. God therefore wished that they be punished to cause them to repent and return to him, and thereby merit to experience the abundant good of the world to come. As the verse states, chastise your son, for there is hope. Do not set your heart in his destruction. Okay, and let's do 11 also. This is from the founder of Chabad. While the punishments of the Torah are expressed as severity, what you called Larry, you called Gvura, their core identity is kindness. It's like if I discipline my child, which parent wants to take revenge on a child? That's not help. That's not a functional parent. You don't want. You may get upset at a child. That happens. You want to teach the child, no matter how upset you are at what a child did. The child comes and says, "Dad, Mom, I recognize what I did. I'm sorry. I love you. You're a functional human being. Says, I love you too. And let's make up the whatever went on. God doesn't want to take revenge on us. This is about core. So the core identity of the punishments is kindness, because through them the soul, the sinner, achieves rectification. If your eyebrow raise was that not every parent would do that, I know. I've met such parents, but that's not healthy in my life.
The thing with this, it's one thing, like you're an adult and you can reflect on things you've done, or even a small child, but like one of the things that, I don't know, maybe it just comes to me, it doesn't seem so applicable, is like when a child is born very, very sick, deformed, they're not gonna make it, like from the moment they're born. And how, like, I don't know, it doesn't seem applicable.
Okay, so let's talk about that in a minute. Okay, I totally get it, because I think I mentioned this recently. I definitely mentioned it recently, maybe I think in this class. When it comes to God and evil and God and suffering, a professor told me many years ago, our first year here in Spring Ridge, he brought him out to speak. His name was George Schlesinger, University of North Carolina. He had Torah knowledge. And he said to me as we were eating dinner in my apartment, my condo in Spring Ridge, said, when it comes to theodicy, which is God and evil or God and suffering, the answers that make you feel good don't really make sense if you drill down. And the answers that make sense are not going to make you feel good. And I found a lot of truth to it. I'm not saying that that's a Torah dictum. I think there was a lot to me saying. Okay. Now, what does it mean make sense? I think what Larry said about looking back at struggles and, oh, that's true. And that makes sense. It's not a blanket explanation, because what I said, you can't use that in a cancer ward. You can't use it with a baby born deformed. Although, I want to talk about that again before we get into that. So here in the approach that they're giving us, say, trust means that I trust that I'm in God's hands. It may not always work out well, but I understand that I've got to do my best. And actually, and we're going to finish off with do my best to create conduits for God's blessing. And even when there's aggravation, to know that some of this is cleansing my soul. And let's just do text 12. And you should not be troubled. The Torah says in Deuteronomy, should not be troubled when you send him free from you. This is an indentured servant for twice as much as a hired servant. He has served you 6 years, and God will bless you in all that you shall do. And what does you shall do mean? It means that we can't just rely on God's blessings. We have to do something to create the blessings. And this is from the third Rabbi in text 13. And explains this more Kabbalistically. The divine flow that God wishes to bestow to this world must endure a long fall until it integrates within such a coarse and distant container so as to produce physical bounty in this material world. This then is the reason why we must engage in business. For the divine flow only comes through a natural vehicle. In other words, God hides his giving hand so much that it seems as if nature is simply running its course. In reality, everything comes from God, and he's just screening himself so much that we cannot see anything miraculous or out of the ordinary. To us, everything seems just natural. For the reason for this is very deep. A result of God's tendency to self-screen, this is on 308 and 308 or 108, 109. Self-screen means to withhold himself, so to speak. Namely, to hide and screen his God, the energy in a coarse and distant natural vehicle. So when a person beseeches God to send them natural material bounty, begging God on Yom Kippur to send blessings to them in this physical world, it's insufficient if the person doesn't put an effort and engage in business and the like. Praying to God is great. Praying to God fervently is great, but then do something. You're praying to God for the blessing, but then the blessing has to have something you can anchor in. Accordingly, when a Jew conducts business, they should consider the following two things. One is to beseech God to send his blessing in material, physical format. Two, while conducting business, they must focus on their faith that it's God's blessing that brings all success, just like any other miracle, such as manna raining from heaven. The business ventures are merely a vehicle in which God can screen his blessing, for that is what God wishes until the end of days, when the earth will miraculously sprout forth goodness. Okay, so that's the end of their lesson today. But I'm not done. the what it tells us, it's a very important, and it's a lot, that in facing life, we have to do whatever we can to protect ourselves. There will be things that will aggravate us and hurt us, and we should not give up, feel abandoned by God. There are certain things that are our soul journey, and recognize that also is part of even hopefully the cleansing of our souls. Looking back at it's horrid to say that everybody just grows from their struggles. If someone says they grew from it, great. I can tell you people who have had children with, and while they don't wish they had it, I don't wish they had it, they will talk about what this did for their family, for themselves. Now, some families can fall apart from it.
Their struggle I'm not so bothered with, okay, as an adult.
Yeah.
I'm bothered with the child's struggle. Somebody's born, their brain is,
Yeah.
they're not even gonna make it, it's.
So why did God create?
I mean,
this
maybe
child?
they took the soul back fast, that's all you could say.
It could be that this child's purpose in life was to be able to help. I don't want to be in the position of legitimizing or explaining away, but and then like this professor said, the answers that make sense are not going to make you feel it. If you tell me that God, because God, there's souls, and there's the eternal nature of things, and God says that a specific soul is going to have what we call a normal life, but then will be implanted in a baby for whatever reason that will have its terrible struggles, but will be able to give the gift of caring, that the people who care for him and draw together family. Yeah, I don't know God's bookkeeping, but I believe in a God. And I don't believe in a God who just doesn't care about a suffering baby. I just don't. So but what do I know? Right? So I can't explain it. And if someone tells me it walks in, God forbid, comes to today and tells me that the baby was born or something, I'm not going to say, so you're good. You're going to grow for it. That's horrible. Don't worry about his soul or her soul. You gotta give them a hug. You try to support them. Obviously, I'm not God. I don't get to say these things, but in my heart, I don't believe God abandoned the baby. And I would hope for this person to be able to adjust to a place where they can also feel that they're not abandoned. That's now. Now I want to get to what I think really should have been the focus of this thing.
Before we get into the cutting off,
Which cutting off?
huh?
What are we cutting off?
The key points.
Okay.
I see how what we've been discussing relates to the question of judgment.
You can, yeah.
Okay. But the discussion essentially ignores the question of judges and their responsibility.
Has nothing to do with it. Except that's in
Exactly.
the same Torah. Right. I told you it wasn't about
But,
that.
if you look at the overview,
The overview is just of the parsha, not of this class. That's why I didn't put it on the thing. I didn't have that in the thing, because the overview, they give you a Reader's Digest about the Torah portion. This isn't about the Torah portion. This is about a specific topic, trusting God.
mhm,
Okay. So I'm going to how do can I get out of it this way? So now I'm going to do another share screen, but first I want to read something to you. In text 7 before, they mentioned Rabbi Bachi ibn Pekuda. Was text 7? Yeah. Rabbi Bachi ibn Pekuda wrote a book. It's called Chovos Halavavot. This is it in Hebrew. This is an old version of it. They come up much nicer these days. Chovos Halavavos was written in the 1200s, and it's a profound theological and ethical work. And he has a whole section on trust. And actually, I brought this in because I was going to translate from here, but I hopefully I can screen share a translation online. And his piece on trust, I would say, is probably the gold standard in the Torah community of what trusting God means. So I want to do a share screen here a second. So I brought this up from a website, Sefaria. This is from the second chapter of his section on trust. And this section, the second chapter, is about what kind of a person do you trust in life? What do we do to engender trust in someone else? And then we're going to take it to God. But first, understand how we trust. And so point number 7, he says, the person we trust is absolutely generous and kind. The most possible extreme of generosity and kindness. To those deserving and to those who are not deserving. And that his generosity and kindness is continuous, never ending without interruption. The Chovos Halvavos, Rabbi Ibn Bukuda, makes a very important point here that we did not mention here. That you trust someone where it's not, what do you deserve? I care about you, I'm going to help you. If I don't think it's good for you, it's one thing. But I'm going to help you. It's not such a quid pro quo. It's not, like we say, Jacob was worried, maybe he did something wrong. He says true faith. Why is Jacob criticized for that? For fearing Esau? So because it's not about what you did. It's about who loves you. What God promised you. So I'm going to stop the share there. And I'm going to go to one more share in a second. There is what I could say, one of the foundational stories in Chabad thought that is based on this, I think to a great extent, on this thought of Rabbi Ibn Bukuda, that a chassid, a Hasidic gentleman came to speak to the third Lubavitcher Rebbe, Rabbi Menachem Mendel, and he about troubles in his life. And the Rebbe turned to him and said, "Tracht gut, wird sein gut." Think positively, and it will be positive. Now, a Rebbe, and that Rebbe also clearly was not into just making people, calm, and they wanted to solve people, help people with their problems. Just think positive. What think positive? There's a negative. Realize I got a real problem. What do you think about positive? What am I supposed to do with that? So the Rebbe wants to develop this. Actually, in the talk that they're quoting on this, which they totally ignored, this whole talk was about that. The whole talk that they did for this, this lesson is predicated on, according to the teacher's manual of this, is about this idea. Think positive and will be positive. And I took the liberty of translating a little bit from that this morning. I sat down because it was frustrating to me. So I sat down, I translated some of it. And actually I made some copies. Well, actually, maybe we just do it all on there. We got big videos there. Is that okay? We just do it all on? Sure. Okay. Okay. I didn't have to make any copies. Okay. This concept of understanding trust can be best understood through the advice of Rabbi Menachem Mendel Lubavitch, known as the Tzemach Tzedek, the name of his book, who said, think positively and it will turn out positively. Oops, it's quick. Okay. The responsibility of trusting God isn't, okay, I did this quickly. It isn't only an indication of our faith in God's merciful love for us. It is its own modality of serving God. It's not just sitting back and saying, listen, God, I know whatever I'm in your hands, whatever happens is up to you. It's actually just like we put up a mezuzah, just like we eat matzah, there's an action a focus we call establishing trust, finding trust. And what is that exercise? Again, faith doesn't work that way. Faith, fine, you talk about it, but it's kind of amorphous. Trust is a concrete exercise. The essence of trust is total reliance on God. To the extent that the person's sense of security depends on other support besides God, that the person, this means, oh, okay, I have to read, but the extent that the person doesn't depend on other support besides God, I feel, sure, I have a doctor, everything, but I feel that God's taking care of me. This means that the severity of a person's situation has no practical bearing, since one relies on God was beyond natural limitations. That means a person is facing, let's talk about a medical diagnosis, not a good one. Of course, that's finding a good doctor. We said you have to find conduits. But they see the doctor as a conduit for God's blessing. It's not that this is a great doctor, hopefully God will bless his efforts. I know I'm in God's hands. And I trust in God. And trusting in God means I have to find the best conduit for God to be able to show me the blessing. Of course, I went to the best doctor. But my trust is in God. This means, okay, and this itself is in itself core. I really got it.
You weren't fully awake, Dave.
It was like 6 o'clock in the morning, and this itself is a core of a person's trust that events will turn out appreciably positive. So, tracht gut means think positive. In other words, I'm confident it'll be okay. I'm confident God will not only do the right thing, and whatever happens, even if I'm dead, God took care of me. I trust you, God, that this is going to be okay. Now, like Hillel, that was about him, but he trusted. Now, trust is an internal effort, a strenuous soul exercise. This triggers God's revealed kindness, which flows as a result of the person's efforts in trusting God. It takes a lot. This is not an easy thing. But it is what we do. We're investing in our relationship with God. We're doing a mitzvah. Mitzvahs have repercussions. This mitzvah of trusting God triggers God's blessing. When a person genuinely, in the depths of one's soul, relies on God alone, to the extent that the person is relieved of any anxiety, this itself causes God to treat the person correspondingly, to show revealed good irrespective of what the person is deserving. Someone comes along to me now and says, I got a problem at home. My stock answer is, you have mezuzahs? Let's check him, let's put him up. I believe in mezuzahs. What are mezuzahs? Mezuzahs are an amulet. I believe in God, and I believe that mezuzahs are an avenue. I believe in it for Torah. I believe in it from what my life has shown me. I believe that the quality of our mezuzahs, or the existence of mezuzahs on a house, makes a difference in real life. Believe it. I believe it. Absolutely, because I think I not only believe it, I've seen it. Now, so a mezuzah is an action that I believe, let's call it, triggers a response from God. Put it up. What Rabbi Menachem Mendel, the Lubavitcher Rebbe, is saying, what the Rebbe is saying here is, this is no less than putting up a mezuzah. Trusting God creates a conduit for God's blessing. And in one of his notes there, he brings the Zohar, which is the foundational book of Kabbalah. And it's I actually would have translated a little more, but I wanted to only translate the part that he wrote because I want to be loyal to what he wrote. The upper world only gives to the lower world in a way that reflects the recipient's state of joy. That from below, the joy draws joy from, I guess, from above. So I want to make it this way. And then he says sadness below. So what the Zohar says there is that the scripture says serve God with joy. And what the Kabbalah is saying is when you serve God with joy, there's a reciprocal relationship going on with God. You're triggering that within God. Walking around pessimistic, you're pushing at that button. The idea is not to ignore problems, but to feel security that I'm not alone, that God, that I'm trusting God. So let's to make it personal, because I thank God I've never been to all those things. I lost, some of you know, I lost pieces of my vision in my eye. At a certain point, we couldn't stop. Doctors couldn't stop it. I lost two peripheral and two central. It was very scary for me. I was young. One baby. I think maybe I had two. I think it was only one baby. Like, what am I doing? I just got married. Finding trust was not an easy thing. It was not an easy thing. And on the other side, the fact is, I still don't have those pieces of vision. I don't know why God had this in mind for me. But I found a doctor, thank God, in Boston, who was able to stop it. I don't know what God wants. But the idea, so it's not like you think, I'm trusting God, everything's gonna be okay. Well, everything is okay, but I didn't get my vision back. This does not mean that all of a sudden, if I walk into a cancer ward and get people to trust, that necessarily means everyone's going to walk out. I don't control all that. But one thing to do, I think mezuzah will help a cancer patient. I believe trusting. The rest is up to God. Because on the other side, maybe then we have to revert. If it doesn't turn out that well, so we revert to response number one. This is what God had in mind. I don't know what that is. But first, we say the idea is tracht gut, sein gut. Think positive and we'll be positive, because as apparently William James, not a famous Jewish philosopher, wrote, that belief creates the actual fact. I'm not sure what he had in mind by saying that, but there is this idea that positive thought creates positive results, and it's not easy. Remember, my Fagi, she should live and be well. She's now 25. So she was very young. She fainted, and she fainted twice, and it took her to an emergency room. I don't know exactly what it was. Took her to a pediatric neurologist, and he said he has to take an MRI. And he said he gave us some very dire possibilities, and then you have to wait 3 days for the MRI. Right? So it was hell. But I remember being in the middle of the night with Malki saying, we can't let our minds go there. Malki was already preparing the cancer patient go to the side. I said, don't go there. Don't go there. God forbid that's it is. There's enough time for that. It said there's a chance, or a good chance. It means there's a chance that not. Focus on that. Trust. Not an easy thing to do. But I believed in that exercise like I believed in Muslim. We couldn't let ourselves go there. Yeah, real life sets in. But I believe that we can impact real life more than we know. All right. So that really went over today. So I don't know how I do this. So if there are any questions, let's make it even longer. All right. Have a great week.
Thank you, Rabbi.
Hopefully
Thank you very
hopefully
much.
next week is less complicated.